Hi, this is Nick Auble with Competition Not Conflict. I'm here with Ian Dobson, who competed in the 2008 Beijing Olympics in the 5K. Hi, Dean. You want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I graduated from Stanford in 2005. I ran for them cross country, indoor and outdoor track for 5 years, and have been running professionally since then for the last 7 years. And yeah, as a Olympian in 2008 was kind of the biggest accomplishment of my running career. So that's who I am.
Awesome. So we're just going to talk about conflicts you've experienced in your career today, and kind of how you went about solving those and how they affected your career and the path that you chose to take.
Right.
So,
okay. All right. Well, I'll start in. I mean, the biggest conflict I've had in my career was one with a manager. In track, we typically, if you're going to run professionally, you sign with a manager right out of college, and then they negotiate contracts with sponsors, individual appearance fees for races, travel, these sorts of things. And I signed with a very popular, successful manager. It seemed like a really safe bet. And was unhappy for a number of small reasons right off the bat, but the major conflict we had came, I guess, 3 years into a 5-year contract when I was eligible for a reduction in the contract. I hadn't been running well, and I had actually run reasonably well that summer, but had missed the what I needed to do to be safe from any reductions. So track season's over in the fall, and I called this manager and asked if he knew if I was going to be reduced. The shoe companies, this was a contract with Adidas, don't always enforce the reductions, and in fact the year before they hadn't with me, so it was I had good reason to think that maybe I would not be reduced, and he said that was the case. We'd had a verbal agreement that if I ran the Olympic A standard, which is basically the standard you need to be eligible to run in the Olympics, that I wouldn't be reduced. It was all verbal. It was not in the contract. So, and I had run that summer. So it seemed pretty reasonable that I wouldn't be, although I was obviously concerned, which was why I asked. Anyway, based on his information, I made some pretty major financial decisions: buying a car, paying a coach, these sorts of things, and come to find several months later that I actually was reduced. So, and I lost a big chunk of money to that reduction. So I then went and tried to figure out what had happened. First talked to him. Why did you tell me this? And he sort of, didn't really get a straight answer. I went straight to Adidas and asked them if they had told him this, and they said absolutely not. We would never tell someone this before it was official, and either way, that you would or would not be reduced. So at that point, I felt like he had just sort of deliberately misled me, and so in my opinion, my contract with him should be void, essentially. He had sort of breached this trust that was the foundation of the relationship, really. I had to be able to trust him. He was a representative. He represented me, and he didn't see it that way, obviously. And so I ended up continuing to have to pay him for the remainder of my contract with Adidas, and even though I didn't want the service anymore. So I essentially fired him, except really,
still had to pay
I still had to pay him. Yeah, I was really getting nothing out of it. It was more of a principled, listen, I'm not going to continue working with you, even though I know I have to continue paying you.
Do you still have that contract with Adidas?
No, it was up at the end of 2009.
Okay. And was that contract sort of done through him? Was he?
He negotiated the contract entirely, yeah, which is why he was entitled to that chunk of it for the duration, for the term of the contract.
And how has that changed your view on the management side of the sport, and how do you handle it nowadays?
It's just made me a lot more skeptical. I mean, maybe skeptical is the wrong word, just more careful. I mean, I think this idea that a manager who's been doing this for a number of years would tell, I call college kids now, would tell a kid that hey, just believe me, they probably won't do this. If you run pretty well, they probably won't take this 40% reduction or whatever, this is a major thing in your life, That, in hindsight, seems really naive for me to just say, oh, great, thanks, good job, Ray. Like, I think that was really naive, and I think that he and just that culture of managers sort of prey on that. Like you're taking kids out of college who've even in college, don't have a lot of money. All of a sudden here's the opportunity to make some real money, and like you're not being particularly careful. And I think it was just it was an expensive but a really good lesson for me, like in just being official about things. So it's not so much being skeptical as just being really sort of meticulous about what exactly is our agreement, and how do we know that that's, how do I know that that's actually an agreement? Like a handshake is good with your buddy, but it's not good with a business partner, is what I would sort of take from that, really.
That's a pretty good lesson we learned. Do you have a different form of management now? Have you hired a different manager?
Yeah, the manager I have now is, he manages a very small number of people, and he does it what's the word? Not freelance, but I hire him basically as an independent contractor. We don't have any sort of formal agreement. If I want him to negotiate a contract, get me in a race, do travel or anything, I pay him an hourly rate to do that. So he gets no percentage of anything. He just works at a professional rate. Same, it's the same whether I'm negotiating a contract with Nike or booking you an airline ticket to wherever, So I end up using him a lot less. I sort of realized that, I actually have the time to do most of these things and the ability to do most of these things. I do need him in some cases, but I pay him a very, very small fraction of what I was paying a manager before, who was on a percentage.
And you're much happier with
I'm
this
a lot
form?
happier, yeah. I'm a lot happier. It's made me take a lot more ownership of things, Like I don't sit back. I'm not passive about what I'm running. I'm not passive about travel arrangements or anything like that. Like it's my responsibility, and that's probably a difference of being 30 years old versus 23. But I think if I had it to do over again, I would really take sort of ownership of my career and everything in a much more real way than I did.
Yeah, it seems like being in control of that aspect of your career probably alleviates some of the stress of worrying about how other people are going to handle it.
Yeah, it does, and it's just, it's kind of good for you too. Like you learn some other skills that as an athlete you hope are going to transfer eventually. Like you can't be an athlete forever, and it's nice to have some of these management things. Like I've, in the last few years, been managing my career much more directly. Where before I was just everything was handed over, and I, ran and did nothing else. So.
Well, it's good to hear that that's working out for you.
Thank
you very much for coming and talking to us.
Of course.
Good luck in the future.
Thank you.